So I would like to warmly welcome everyone. My name is Arpad Szabo from the Department of Urban Planning and Design at the Faculty of Architecture, Budapest University of Technology and Economics. I will be the host of tonight's event together with Wettstein Domonkos, my colleague. You will see us also Domonkos in a few minutes. But of course, our main guest for tonight, or main personality for tonight is Patrick Lüth from Snohetta, Innsbruck. I'm also broadcasting him just for a few seconds. Tonight's event is an event of the Department of Urban Planning and Design. It's part of a series of the department that we initiated a few months ago called Urban Rendezvous. In this Urban Rendezvous series, we are inviting international and Hungarian architects, personalities for lectures or for discussions. But of course, connected to our topic, Department of Urban Planning and Design, the main focus is always talking about issues of urbanity, urban design, urban planning. Our goal is not only to bring interesting topics to wider audience, but of course the goal is also to bring it to students primarily, because we are an educational institution, but also to academic staff, but to everybody else who are interested in such topics. And just very, very briefly, what is the, so to say, the topic of tonight's lecture? How Snohetta arrives to this series of lectures. I think it's pretty much well known among architects or among professionals that 2 years ago, or actually 2.5 years ago, there was a big international competition, the Budapest Southgate competition here in Budapest. And this competition was included some invited architecture firms, but also some others participated. But what is important for us right now is that the Innsbruck office of Snohetta actually prepared the winning entry for this competition. So since then, that's the time when we got to know each other with Patrick, and I have been insisting on inviting him for an academic lecture here at the Technical University. And actually, if we can say if there's one positive feature of the whole pandemic around us, is that this pandemic situation made it easier for us to invite Patrick, because now he can sit in his Innsbruck office, but he is with us, and he will, of course, talk to us about his activities and the activities of his office. So just for a very quick glimpse, I'm introducing Domonkos Wettstein, my colleague, who will also participate or help me with the discussion. And then I'm handing the floor and the voice over to Patrick, who will maybe introduce himself a little bit, and then of course we will go ahead with the lecture.
Okay, Arpad, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I would prefer to be in Budapest and not to sit in the office here. I sit in the office here a lot, and I sit in front of screens, smaller screens, bigger screens, headphones, no headphones. You know, giving a lecture in a foreign city is something very important. And normally when I prepare for a lecture, I always use the journey to not only travel, but also to mentally prepare for this situation. So of course, maybe it's an advantage that we were able to make this happen tonight, but Just 20 minutes ago, I was still sitting at my computer and working on some emails. So, so these new physical realities are something that we need to discuss. Actually, what does it mean that we're in the same space right now, but not in the same location? How can we recreate this sort of atmosphere? And that's why also for this lecture tonight, I'm testing a slightly different format. In that I want this to be a little bit more interactive than your everyday video broadcast. We could have recorded this yesterday and just sent it out to the students, and we wouldn't even know if it was interesting to anybody. So that's why for this lecture tonight, I really want the audience to participate. Maybe Arpad, you can also check how many people are in the audience right now, because this is also usually something that I see. I see in front of me, is it 6 people sitting in an auditorium, or is it 150? And how do they look at me? Are they smiling? Are they guessing what's going on? Are they critical? So I want to try to recreate some of this atmosphere by having the audience participate. So I don't know, have you already started to put my presentation online also?
Not yet. You have to share your screen first.
Oh, I have to share my screen. I'm sorry. See this? I told you, technical glitches always happen. You can see it now? No. Now you can see. Can you see a mountain? Yes. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we have around 180 people in the presentation, which is fantastic, I would say. And I want you to use the chat function, this Q&A function, to post questions, to ask me things. And also, after a few minutes, after I've introduced myself, you will be able to steer this lecture. I have 13 chapters prepared that if I go through all of them, it would probably take much too long. So I'm interested in what you are interested in, and so you will have the possibility to select out of these 13 different chapters what do you want to listen, with the effect, hopefully, that I will get some feedback, I will be challenged, maybe I don't know exactly what to say, but maybe we will find a story that is not that I did not expect to tell tonight. So this is my plan for tonight. I hope you're fine with with this slightly modified format. But like I said, this is a new reality that we are starting to face, and we have to challenge, like always in our disciplines, we have to challenge the way we do things. So I will start with my presentation. Snohetta, that's how you pronounce the name of our company, and Snohetta is not the name of a person. Snohetta is the name of a mountain. You'll find out during the lecture why we chose this name for our company. But what's important is that since the beginning, Snohetta is now around 32 years old, it was important that we talk about places more than individuals. We are a collective of people. We've always been multiple disciplines, started with landscape architecture and interior architecture. And so we found it appropriate not to put one person or a group of people in the foreground in the name, but to put a place in the name, in the foreground that would represent this office. I myself, so now the PowerPoint, I myself started this journey in this company around 16 years ago when I was asked by an assistant professor at the university in Innsbruck if I had any plans for the summer. That was in 2005. No plans. Well, you want to come to Oslo? I said yes, and then 3 weeks later I was on a ferry boat from Denmark to Norway, and here you can actually see the Snohetta office right on the fjord, and in the background here you see a big crane, and this was the construction site of the opera house at the time. So this, of course, was a fantastic time to enter this company. It was around 50 people in the company. This was my first working place for Snohetta, you know, looking out to the fjord, fantastic view out to the ferry boats coming out and in. So for a person who's from the Alps, this was definitely a treat. I got to visit the construction site of the Opera House once a week, every Friday afternoon. We had guided tours to check out the construction site. So this was, of course, exciting times. But I was working as an intern, working on 2 competitions for some museums in Denmark. I wasn't so sure about my performance. So on the last day before I left after this internship, I cooked Speckknödel for the whole office, trying to make a good impression, at least with my cooking skills. What happened, Speckknödel, they fell apart a bit, but people were very brave in eating them. But still, Snohetta asked me to come back after 1 year. And that was pretty close when we actually opened the Opera House. So the Opera House is, of course, representative of so many things. I think it's mostly representative of a paradigm shift in how we think urban buildings in public buildings in urban contexts, you know, reserving buildings for people, not only for its core purpose, like here it's opera that not so many people are actually interested in Norway, but making it accessible to everybody and making a place that has 2 functions on top of each other. So I think since the opening of the Opera House in 2007, this whole idea of how is public real estate supposed to be used has gone through a pretty much of a shift. The Opera House is, of course, now already 2 years after it opened. It was listed in the Heritage Authority in Norway, and you know, at the time, Snohetta wasn't such a big deal, but we've grown. We're in 7 locations around the globe. We're around 300 people. We have finished projects in Scandinavia. We have completed projects in North America, like the San Francisco Modern Art Museum. We did the renovation of the Times Square. We have projects in Asia, like our first project, the library in Alexandria, but working on a new big opera house in Shanghai. But we're doing all kinds of things, like we did the design for the banknotes of the Norwegian bank, or doing some product design, like the cutlery for a restaurant in Copenhagen. This is what makes Snohetta so interesting, is that we work on a variety of scales with a variety of disciplines in different locations with different cultures. We go from the pixel to the city, you know, we do digital design, do websites and stuff, but we go all the way to urbanism to understand how people interact, how people actually use urban spaces, and how we can influence that through our work. We're very physical people. We try to meet every other year to walk up on that mountain called Snohetta. This is actually a ritual that we will have to reconsider, because first of all, right now it's very difficult to travel. It's not safe. It's not, and it's not sustainable. So we are thinking about what can we do to, again, to re-innovate, to reinvent this tradition of walking up this hill called Snohetta. That's me in our Innsbruck office. We're 25 people here in Innsbruck. So I thought I'd give you this short introduction to who I am. And now this is the first time you can choose. We found out that there's a bit of a delay in this presentation software. So you can read through these 13 chapters. And please, as soon as you think something is interesting, just type the number in that Q&A window, and then as soon as we see a pattern, I will continue my presentation with that topic. So I'm interested to see if people dare. I mean, we can't track it anyway, so don't be shy. Just please post what you're interested in.
So people already see it, actually. I'm checking it on another screen. But while we discussed that if we have to wait, we will have some small talk. You already said there are 25 people in your office. What does that mean? How many architects? How many? You said it's an interdisciplinary team that you work with.
Yeah, good question. I mean, we don't have all those disciplines that I showed in all the locations. That's a little bit difficult. In Oslo, we can really cover everything from digital designers to urbanists. Here in Innsbruck, we have interior architects, landscape architects, and urbanists. These are the core disciplines that we actually deal with. So I would say 2/3 normally are architects, and then we try to have small groups of professionals that that we can deal with. So, okay, I can see 4, 5, 4, 4, 4. So we will start with 4. Challenge the brief. Up. This is a good one. I think it's something we learned a lot from. I will show you with some examples why we think challenging the brief is important. For example, this is one project that maybe you actually know, not this building itself. This is in central Norway at the base of this mountain range that is called the Dovre Mountains. And this national park people, they asked us to do a reindeer museum because they have a lot of reindeers in this region. Yeah, so we thought, okay, a reindeer museum could be interesting, but it's not going to make a lot of people go to Rauland, to this place here. So what we normally do is we look around, we talk to the client, we try to understand what is it that they maybe actually want. You know, the Reindeer Museum was a thought they had, but we checked out, and what they ended up getting is this project. So how do we end up with this sort of project? Is we try to analyze demands and possibilities. So only a 15-minute walk away from this old building that we saw, you have this spectacular viewpoint where you can see to this mountain here, which is the actual Snohetta mountain. So we were quite aware that doing something in the natural landscape with a new interpretation of geometries that we found on site could be potentially much more spectacular than a bland old reindeer museum. And it's a place that people go to. It's a place that people can use in a variety of situations. You can even stay overnight. It's always open. You don't need a key. It's fully accessible. And it's accessible in winter and summer. So it's a place without actually a specific function, but it's a place that enables being there and understanding this landscape and this surrounding in a totally different way. I think much more so than with a reindeer museum where you explain to people what is a reindeer all about. Another project where we challenge the brief or where we challenge the client in another way is a little restaurant on the southern tip of Norway. This is called Lindesnes. This is all the way south in Norway. And so a client who owns a hotel in this town, he had a plot right by the water, and he wanted the typical fish restaurant on the kai. But if you look at the map, you could think, okay, this is fantastic coastal landscape in Norway. But if you look a little bit closer, actually part of the area is quite industrial, and it's not as beautiful as so many other places here in Norway. So what we did, you know, this is the view out. It's okay. It's not bad, but it's not spectacular. So our concept was to immerse it and not to build a restaurant at the kai, but to build a restaurant under the water. So this just a little twist, you know, just rotating down this building 15 degrees out of the horizontal gave the whole project a totally new meaning. We got in touch with all kinds of people to understand how can we make this work. And of course, in Norway, they have a lot of experience with building close to or in water with all those oil rigs and stuff. So we found that it's a possible task. It was built on a dry dock only a few kilometers away from the actual construction site. The whole building in concrete, putting the glass, the 15-centimeter acrylic window in the front here. And then taking it over to the construction site and slowly submerging it down into the water and then fastening it to the bedrock on the bottom of the sea. So what it gives you is, of course, a totally different impression of this surrounding. There is no more industrial area. There is no more visual clutter. There's only a space that is so much in connection to this site. So you know, this slight rotation gave the client a totally different building than what he was initially expecting. And also programmatically, I mean, this is a pretty small space. It only houses maybe 30 guests at once. But with this exceptional architecture and with these images, he was able to recruit, for example, a fantastic chef from Denmark who has a 2-star Michelin rating. And you can only get one menu. You order it online. It's booked out for about approximately half a year in advance. And so the quality of the food and the quality of the space totally align. So this is how it looks like. I don't think you're going to be super maybe still some hunger after you leave the restaurant, but it's a total. It's of course a very exciting task, and in this situation, we draw everything. If the client allows us, we drew the tables, we design the chairs, we do the cutlery, we do the menu card, we do the logo. Of course, this is very exciting if you have the possibility to have it's not about control, but to have the possibility to be creative in all these different scales and disciplines for a specific topic. So now, second round of voting.
Okay. Meanwhile, a quick question. Maybe it will be a little bit strange question, but you said that you challenged the brief. What I would be the most curious about, how a discussion with the client goes in that way, in that situation. Just.
Yeah, it's sensitive because you know, the client he pays for the job, so he normally he's the one who's in control. But that's why we try to have a thorough dialogue with the client and try to get him on board to step back from his maybe predetermined decisions. And we have processes for that. I can also show some slides on that. We really try to get the client in a state of mind where he opens up and where we can discuss on a very different level. You know, many times we don't discuss design itself. We discuss concepts. Because it's our responsibility to do a design for a specific concept. And I'm sure you know these situations that clients, they have a very clear picture of an architectural solution, but maybe they have not questioned the problem correctly. So we have to avoid that. We have to go back a step. We have to give him confidence that going on this journey with us will maybe give him the right questions and not only the answers to a predetermined question. So are we getting any new feedback on the topics? Yes, I see, of course, a lot of 13. 888, I would say, we'll wait a bit with 13. We could answer a question. How much time do you spend on research and development to make such projects possible? How do you make it work? Is it feasible? Well, interesting. Is it feasible? Economically, it's difficult because it is a lot of work, yeah, and we do have to do research. So again, that is a question: how well can we involve, or how can we make a client enthusiastic about a concept or a strategy that he's willing to pay that extra dollar for making something like that work? I have to be honest, you know, the small projects, the ones that stick out, like this underwater restaurant, we barely make a profit on it, but we need to do it because we can challenge ourselves and we can make these iconic projects. But of course, we need other ones that have a larger scale, that have a bigger volume to make that feasibility. Okay, let's check the numbers. I would say there is a pretty good, of course, there's a lot of 13. I will tell about the Budapest project, but maybe not right away. 5, 5, 5. Okay, let's take 5. That is good. What is 5? Okay, don't try to understand everything. There's a lot of people that do things better than you. Yes. I always say we're anti-master architects. I dislike this idea that there are people that have an opinion that is superior to another group of people. So we try to develop processes that that get out the best of a collective and not out of an individual. This is a seating plan. That's how we are organized in our office spaces. This was the Oslo office, I think, something like 12 years ago. The color of, I don't remember exactly now, I think the shape of the dot was discipline and the color was the project. And that's what you get, this almost, I would say, chaotic project communication amongst people. But you know what you also get? You get this overlap of communication. You get to understand things that you were not actively involved in. So how does this diagram look in reality? This is now the video. Yeah, it works. This is a time lapse of the office space in Oslo, also a few years ago. But you can see the high degree of activity. Of course, people then always go back and focus on their computer, but there is this really high level of motion inside the office space. You know, people have discussions behind the computers, in the meeting spaces, in the background. Here you can see the model workshop. And we think this is super valuable. Many people, if I show this video to some economists, they always say, but the people are always distracted and you cannot concentrate. But there is again, an added value in this open way of communicating. And you also see this code here, the headphones. People put on headphones without starting music a lot, but it gives them a space of intimacy, and it also communicates to the other people, I need a quiet minute right now. So what's interesting about this video is that it was taken at the same time when a group of researchers was following Snohetta, and they wrote a book about the creative processes that we utilize to get to our results. It's called Idea Work. It is actually available as a commercial book. They didn't only analyze Snohetta, they analyzed a series of companies, amongst other a big law firm in Norway, or also a company that deals with geology, because in Norway, of course, that is very important. When you look for oil, you have to understand how to read these geological maps. And also that requires creativity, or at least a specific way of looking at things. So they analyzed these different companies and they found out that it's these 10 creative drivers that really trigger innovative results. And what we did out of this book is we developed our own workshop process that I talked about, which gives us the possibility to work with a client on a superior level. Here we talk about concepts, we do not talk about design. We talk about values, and we do not talk about, for example, building materials. But this is very valuable, and we try to include also other people. We try to include, for example, of course, typically we will have some structural engineers and some other engineers and stuff like that, but maybe we'll try to get a philosopher or an artist into this group, because they will give us an outside view on a specific topic. And in these workshops, because of, for example, one of these creative drivers was getting physical. So this is a typical workshop where we build models together with a client. This is the CEO of Swarovski, of a company with 30,000 people. He comes to our office because they have a specific problem, and we start to build models with him, and they love it. You know, it's a student working together with this guy who has this enormous responsibility, but this new way of thinking with his hands, with materials that normally on his computer he never touches, you know, glue and styrofoam and some cardboard. It will initiate new thoughts. So we are pretty much aware that that physical collaboration is essential, not only for creativity, but also for innovation. I'll show you a project where I think that we have, as a result also of this process that you saw this image from, where we think that we have achieved a space that is representative of this way of thinking. It's called the Swarovski Manufacture. It's in Wattens in Austria. It's a quite large building. It's 100 meters long. It's 40 meters wide. So it's 4,000 square meters of floor plane. It's column free. It's one open space, 10 meters clear height with a roof made mostly of glass. And this, on the inside, you can see this building, this collects everybody who has any sort of knowledge around this topic, and Swarovski is a crystal company for cut glass crystal. So anybody who has any knowledge or any idea about what crystal is about, they will meet in this space. They have prototyping machinery, big CNC mills, big molding and casting facilities, but they also have sewing machines, they have application stations, they have goldsmiths and stuff, and they let external people come into this space and use it, you know, for a whole a series of days or so. And what happens is that the guy who is operating the CNC machine will be able to have a coffee at the same table with the designer from Paris who is thinking about this new idea of how to apply crystal for their next fashion show. So this space for physical interaction, I think, is so important. And this is, of course, something that I'm very interested in now. What is going to happen with the coronavirus crisis, where we are now not allowed to meet and collaborate in physical spaces? I don't have an answer yet, but I think there is no way of avoiding these sort of physical interactions. These are all pictures from this Manufacture project. Another video, because this space is a little bit more easy to understand in motion. We don't have to look at the whole one. You can check out the website. I think you can find it there. But just to give you an idea about the quality of the space, of course, you know, in every sort of situation, what we try to do is we link up the qualities of, for example, the brand Swarovski, of course, is all about crystal, and crystal had to do with geometry and light. Not necessarily with the shape of a crystal. You know, everybody will think of a chaton shape or something like that. This is not what Swarovski is only about. It's really about craftsmanship. It's about beauty and these kind of things. And so we try to distill these qualities and put them into a new arrangement. To build a building that represents the geometry of a crystal would be much too easy, I think. So that's why we try to go this extra way around and try to create something that is representative of these values and not so much of the first thought. And what's nice about this building is that it can be utilized in a whole variety of different ways. They have public lectures there. Up to 300 people can use this central staircase, while at the same time these CNC machines in the background are still working. So this is quite fascinating how, you know, how you can overlay, again, a little bit like at the Opera House, like I told you, we're overlaying opera with a democratization, you know, with a public square. Here it's production and the possibility to have public presentations or discussions like here. Another project I want to show you where I try to think with you about what is the future of our workspace is going to be like. This is a project we just realized last year here in Austria, close to Innsbruck. It's called Alpinschule Innsbruck ASI. It's a headquarter of a very innovative traveling company that are also very concerned about sustainability. So it was quite obvious that we would want to build a building for them that is as sustainable as possible, meaning environmental sustainability, meaning low CO2 footprint, meaning short traveled materials. That's why this timber is right from Tyrol, right from the region where it is being built. But what we also wanted to really think about was this culture of collaboration. That's what this whole chapter is about. Because one individual is very good at a specific task, but a series of individuals in an orchestrated way, they can achieve so much more than just the sum of these individuals. So that's why in this company that was before this building split up into departments that had their own spaces. They normally had 2 or 4 people, cubicles. They are all in one space, not like in the Oslo office on one floor plane, because the space was too limited. So it's a 3 level building where this continuous space is only divided with soft partitions like these meeting rooms, but actually it's one room, it's one space, and the departments have been broken up into spread out over the whole room. Of course, in this sort of situation, any client will say, yeah, but acoustically, it's not possible. That's why the acoustics in these offices are very important. So we had this very high performance acoustic ceiling and a lot of acoustic materials everywhere, so that even the call center, and imagine this travel agency, people calling from all around the world because their plane is late, because their Sherpa didn't arrive, whatever, the call center is spread out over the whole space. So similarly to what I showed you about our office, it's this overlay of communication, it's this added level of information that gives added value, and that I firmly believe in will also be valuable in the future. So I would say another round of voting. Arpad, how are we doing?
Meanwhile, just a question from the audience. Are the designers separated from the management, or everyone works in the same open office?
Same open office, same open office. I was sitting beside the CFO for 2 years. That was funny. I didn't understand, the financial manager. And we try not to have secrets. Of course, sometimes if it's some HR topics or so, then we have meeting rooms where you can even close the door. But this is quite unusual. And I mean, in general, why should management be in a different space? They have to understand what it's about. Really, I mean, for the management, it's actually the most important that they share the space with the designers, because we always get the blame, for being too slow or being inefficient. But if you hear those phone calls of those clients that have these problems, also the management will understand better how our processes really work. So I saw a lot of 8s. Is it fair to say that we could do number 8? There is a lot of 8s here. I will do 8.
Yes, of course. Why not?
Be strategic, but allow for serendipity. Yeah, this is a short chapter. It actually, I tried to explain why Innsbruck is in this line of cities and places. Oslo, of course, is obvious because it was founded there, and then we get all these big cities, except for Adelaide, it's also not so big, and then you have Innsbruck. Well, it was a coincidence. It was not strategic. We started off, like I told you, I was an intern in Oslo. I worked for 5 years in Oslo. It was fantastic, but I had to go back to Innsbruck because of family reasons, but we stayed in touch. And I started to do some competitions, and it was quite interesting, this collaboration, because from Norway, in a strange way, we never managed to put our foot on the German-speaking market. But having this office in Innsbruck allowed us to. So we won this pitch for Swarovski, and then we just grew. And this is our first space here in Innsbruck, just down the road, and that's how we worked in the beginning. So you might think that at Snohetta, global company, 300 people, everything is always super professionally organized. I would not say so. This but the energy and the dynamic we had in this space was absolutely fantastic. You know, a lot of young people that, you know, contributed to this idea of bringing Snohetta to the German market. Like I said, we're 25 people now, and what's funny about it is that Innsbruck, even though it may seem awkward, but it fits very well. Snohetta is the name of a mountain. We have all these mountains around us. Norwegians are people that really enjoy walking in the mountains, and that's what we do too. So I think actually, if you think about it a second time, Innsbruck is a pretty good fit, and maybe Munich or Vienna would not be. So that's what I mean with allow for serendipity. If things happen, don't be too critical about it. And 2 years ago, I think 3 years ago already, instead of walking up Snohetta, we walked up on a mountain here in Tyrol. And you can see these Norwegians, they just feel at home. It's no problem at all. Okay, let's check the feedback. Maybe some questions also we can take. In the meanwhile, I will check here. Is there anything?
Yeah, there are a number of questions. Somebody was asking about most important values connected to sustainability.
Yeah, I could talk about that one. If we then take, for example, this one, then we do it in a little bit different way. This is about sustainability. Make bold statements, but be prepared. I mean, this is about environmental sustainability, because this is really our responsibility. I think for Snohetta, I mean, I think for any company, if you talk about sustainability, you must not forget that there's always 3 layers of sustainability. There's environmental sustainability, there's economic sustainability that your project developer will like to talk about, and then there is social sustainability. I think in terms of social sustainability, we have some pretty valid projects that show how you can actually give public space value and credibility. And that, I mean, a building or built environment will increase in value. And now I do not mean economic value, but value to the people if people like the space. It's a very, very simple equation. And liking the space or loving the space makes that big difference of how long a building will actually survive. And this is the main aspect also in terms of environmental sustainability. If you remove a building, especially if it's built out of concrete after 20 years, this is a massive waste of energy. But if we look into the aspects of environmental sustainability a little bit closer, I think the topic that is not discussed enough is embodied energy. In German, it's graue Energie. It's the energy that is embedded in your construction material, but also not only in your construction material, also in the vehicle or in the mode of transportation that brings the construction material to your construction site. If you have steel that's produced in China and is shipped to Europe, and that steel goes into your building, you will not achieve an environmentally sustainable project, because the making of the steel and the transportation will have consumed so much CO2 that there's no chance that this will be a project that will have a negative CO2 footprint. So we, 2019, Kjetil, one of our owners, he said in an interview that we aim to make all our buildings carbon negative within 20 years. It's actually a little bit more ambitious than that. Within 10 years, we want all the projects that we are working on to be CO2 negative. This is quite a high level that we have set for ourselves, but we're working on it. This seemingly boring project was one of the first projects where we actually realized a CO2 negative building. This is a rehabilitation project. That's why we had no possibility to intervene on the geometry of the building. But we learned a lot. We were able to take out the whole HVAC system and introduce a natural ventilation strategy. which reduces a big amount of energy out of the building. We were able to use a lot of recycled materials. For example, all these acoustic baffles are recycled polyethylene bottles. So it's really getting into this discussion of what materials do we use, how much CO2 do they have embodied, and how do we assemble them that when the building comes to the end of its life, we can actually take them apart again and reuse the material, because also the deconstruction of the building is part of this equation. We have completed a series of buildings here. This is also one test project. It's actually a private house for a client that was interested in this, call it technology or strategy of a powerhouse. We have finished a school in Norway that is also CO2 negative. And what you'll always get, this is a refurbishment in Boston of a house that is also a testing facility, has sensors everywhere. Here it was in a very strictly regulated part of Boston where we had no chance again of being very expressive on the language of the architecture, but it doesn't matter. This is really for understanding how do these things work. So this is a research lab also for CO2 negative buildings, but we have now also started to realize some bigger projects like this powerhouse Brattørkaia in Trondheim in Norway. It's a 20,000 square meter building with a huge PV roof. Of course, if you want to be CO2 negative, you have to produce energy on site. There's no way around that. And currently, the best technology to do that is with photovoltaics. And in order to be photovoltaics to be efficient enough so that they can write off themselves, they have to be ideally placed and optimized. There's no point in just putting photovoltaics in any sort of roof, because you run the risk that the embodied CO2 of the photovoltaics will be higher over its lifespan. So these are things that really have a strong impact on the design of the building, on the geometry of the buildings, and that is what we are currently testing. Here we have another powerhouse, another CO2 negative project that we completed last year. You see these building shapes. For example, here we had to expand the roof size in order to be able to achieve the required amount of photovoltaics. So that's why this cantilever happened. Of course, these buildings are mostly constructed in timber, because with concrete or steel, you don't have any chance at all. And here you see the roof, of course, clad with photovoltaics and a little rooftop terrace. So it's going to be interesting if we follow this strategy, what sort of geometries we are actually going to develop. But I think, especially for the students, it is very important that they understand the impact of this sort of thinking into the architectural design. They don't have to all be polygonal buildings. We are also working on another building here. This is going to be the world's northernmost powerhouse and the first hotel. This is called the powerhouse Svart. It's on the foot of the so-called Svartisen glacier, north of the polar circle. Interesting building, a lot of research to be done. Interestingly enough, even though you'd think that the more north you go, the less light you have, that's actually not correct. You actually have more light over the course, over the span of a year. The question is just how do you store the energy that you produce in summer to be able to use it in the winter and so on. But of course, again, a timber building, a building that is placed mostly in the water because the land is even more valuable in this location here. Valuable in terms of there is very little flat land in these areas, but there is a lot of flat ocean, so we put it out mostly into the ocean. And so we say we really try to do a very thorough parameter analysis. We try to understand what are the functions in this sort of building, where can we overlay functions, where can we use spaces multiple times in order also to reduce the amount of program. And we really try to question all sorts of parameters. And what we also do is we try as much as we can to understand the impact of the energy production in our designs. And here we use grasshopper for Rhino to really do thorough analysis of photovoltaic yield and try to optimize geometry before we have to go to the energy consultant. Because there's a lot of work in there, and if people understand, if people understand the consequences of their design early on in the design process, this will have a big impact on the geometry of a building. So I don't believe in always, asking externals right from the first minute. Like I said earlier, of course, it's a good thing to have collaborators, but you have to understand the main drivers yourself. You have to be able to operate those tools to really get grips on this sort of topics. Okay.
So we can. I don't want to influence the presentations, but here.
Yes, please. That's what I asked you to do.
The Hungarian issues. So, what about Budapest? And here are questions related to these topics. For example, could you tell us a few words about Southgate Master Plan? How has it changed after winning the competition? Or another question, a little bit general, do you normally win projects by competitions or direct commissions? You won the Budapest Southgate competition. You tied with Sana for the National Gallery a few years ago. You have a presence in Hungary too. So could you tell us some words about the Budapest situation? Or...
Absolutely. We can go to the question number 13. I did not prepare a comparison from the competition entry to the final project, but I can tell you that even though we worked on the project for almost 1.5 years, I would say the main qualities of our competition design are still represented in the final design. It was very important. I loved this competition. I think it was really a well-organized competition. It was a semi-invited competition, so I think half of the teams were invited and half of them had to pre-qualify. And to tell you a little bit how it went, we actually, and yeah, I can say it, we actually, sometimes we enter a competition where we say all or nothing. To be too sensible, maybe that's the wrong wording, but we wanted to be bold on this competition because at first it didn't seem that interesting. A student city for, I don't remember now what it was in the brief, 15 or 20,000 students south of Budapest. Okay, we thought, okay, this could be any old residential project, but that's not what we want to do. So we, in the competition design, and I think you would agree, Arpad, we were pretty daring. We said, okay, let's be a bit wild, and if they like it, then we can win, and if they don't, then we're just gonna lose. No problem, So really go in with a good idea, and show them what the possibilities are. I'll tell you a little bit about the project itself. You all know the city, and I always call it the problem of the city is that everybody identifies Budapest with the Danube, but you can't get down there. You have the tram, you have the streets, and they have this very harsh edge, and then you have the water, which is quite fast. So you can't spend time at the water edge. And if you know cities like Copenhagen or Oslo or Stockholm or even Venice, the quality is at the water edge. So this is what we really wanted to emphasize because we had the possibility of this RSD channel, which is regulated, which does not have the problem of the rising and lowering water table, and which does not have this current and everything. We thought this is the fantastic opportunity to create a situation where it can have an interaction point with the water edge. So really putting the water in the foreground and emphasizing the interaction of the people with the water. When we mentioned to the client the first time that we would imagine that there would be people swimming everywhere, they didn't understand what we were meaning because they said it's not allowed to swim in the canal. I said, why not? This is what we want to achieve. And then we started to engage them in this process. And we really also, sorry, I'm a little bit out of sync with the slides. You know, there's this beautiful market hall there that's unfortunately in very bad shape. But this fantastic building with a lot of possibilities here. You know, the site of the location approximately 5 kilometers south of the center, so it's super ideally connected to the city center. If you really get the politicians to improve the cycling lanes along the Danube, you'll have to work on that. But we believe that the location is almost unique in a European context. You know, if you look at other developments in Europe, like Seestadt Aspern in Vienna, it's so far out, but here we're so close to the city center, and this is a totally urbanized, the possibility of getting a very high density, very urban situation here. So like I told you, what we really wanted to achieve is to create this close connection to the water, and in order to do so, we introduced a second canal. We have the RSD canal here. In the competition design, we had another canal that went all the way back, almost to this to the train lines here. In the final design, we had to reduce the length of this canal, but we created this sort of island in this RSD channel to increase the amount of water edge. So a lot of our urban design really has to do with the interaction of people and water. What's also quite clear is that there are two different edges. One is a natural edge that is along a big park that we are introducing, and the second edge is this very urban water edge that we are introducing along this student city. We also tried to introduce a sort of an urban corridor with two purposes. First one is to really connect the Csepel Island to the center of Budapest through this corridor of buildings. And the second one is also to shield off this fantastic park area here from this very highly trafficated road. You see these the urban structure, the different kinds of connection into their neighborhoods, because what we don't want is an isolated island of urban density. What we totally want is something that is woven into the network of the city and that will expand beyond its borders. So that's why we really spent a lot of energy in making these connections as good as possible. And then, of course, it really goes into the details. You know, how are the public spaces treated? What are the qualities of those public spaces? How much green can we introduce? One aspect that I really want to show you. So sorry, jumping around a little bit. These are renderings that are indicative of what the Southgate area could look like in 20 years. Probably it will look very different because the building design is not part of our task. But the quality, the atmosphere is something that we try to really manifest in our work. So I will show you a little bit later how we do that. So the waterfront I've talked about, we have different conditions, a natural condition and a variety of different conditions along this, along the student city itself. But what's interesting about this is that we have water not only as this interactive element for the people, we use water in a variety of ways with ecologic systems to clean the water and to, by cleaning the water through these ecologic systems, improving over time the water quality of the RSD channel. So any runoff will not go into the canal system. It will be cleaned in biotopes, in ecologic filtration systems that will then spill out into those two new channels and then in the end into the RSD channel. So this, what you see here actually is not directly connected to the RSD channel. This is actually a retention basin, but so it's an infrastructure to improve over the time the quality of the water, but also improve the quality of spaces here, things like evaporative cooling, shading, and so on. So I think in summer these will be really appealing landscapes here. And you don't really see that it's actually infrastructure. It is park landscape that is at the same time serves these interstructural purposes. Same with this city park. This is if you look at Budapest, there is sort of a ring of parks. There's of course a big lack of green spaces in the city center, especially on the Pest side. This is not something that we were able to influence with our design here, but of course to create this large park, which is not a park that is primarily aesthetic, but that is primarily functional to serve both recreational but also these new urban qualities, meaning these performative qualities to improve the quality of the land here. Same idea, runoff is being treated, goes through ecological systems with high biodiversity, able to attract species that used to be endemic and that are going to come back. And then, of course, about the urbanity, the urban qualities, the architecture. We worked in all kinds of different workshop formats with small groups of people and bigger groups of people, workshops with up to 150 stakeholders that were then able to give their feedback during the design process, but also workshops in smaller groups of people where we had with the key stakeholders, had them in our office here in Innsbruck. For example, I think I have a different photograph here where we, for example, also use new technologies like virtual reality to show consequences of density, of height, and so on in an interactive model. Here I have this this image of Mr. Schneller in the virtual reality, checking out the density of the city to be. So this is actually quite interesting. We had this dynamic model where we were able to simulate within a few clicks, you know, what does it mean if we build 600,000 square meters, 800,000 square meters, 1 million square meters? What are the impacts? And so in this situation, actually, the VR can be a very powerful tool because it gives you a very different impression than just looking at a screen or a model. Trying to introduce a big functional mix. These are only, of course, only individual slides from a long presentation. But the traffic system, what's interesting about this is that the whole peninsula is car-free. There is no individual car traffic on this peninsula, only a tramway that goes along a central spine, a series of parking facilities around the perimeter, but only for delivery and for emergency. There will be no cars on this in this student city. So really optimized for micromobility, for bicycles, for pedestrians, and for public transport. So, of course, all these things all have consequences, and some of these suggestions we made were quite unusual in a Hungarian context. I mean, suggesting that we don't need any parking lots because we don't have any cars in this area is very unusual. But we were actually successful in convincing the client that this was a good idea. Also, I have to say that we spent quite some time in discussing, for example, the necessity of using timber as the main building material. Of course, our influence as master planners is quite limited in this respect, but I think there will be possibilities, especially in the regulation and then in the way you deal with developers to incentivize the use of timber as building materials instead of using concrete, which is, of course, the most easy choice to do. This slide is just one slide out of what we call the Architecture Handbook. So the way this whole master plan works is that we developed the structure of the city, we developed the functionality of the traffic network and everything. But for the architecture itself, we have developed a catalog of possibilities that is coded and connected to certain regions of that master plan, so that in the upcoming competitions, the architects have a limited amount of variety how they can design their buildings. I think it's very important that this will lead to diversity, but at the same time, a coherence in the appearance of the buildings. We will jump over this video. This is boring now. We don't need to look at it. Yeah. What were your other questions in relation to Hungary? The Liget project, well, I hear that also Sana is not so successful in realizing this one. Well, you know, that's how it goes. Some you win, some you lose. We got the second one on that, on the Liget. It's actually a pretty high percentage of the projects that we realize that are come through competitions. I have to say, there's no way around competitions. It's a lot of work and a lot of pain, but the interesting projects are many times come out of the competitions. Any other questions that you had right now?
There is an interesting question about the globalization and the global position of the office. That don't you think if big offices have designs, buildings all around the world, the diversity of cultures will disappear?
Yeah,
so
I don't think so.
How you can understand your global network of the offices of Snohetta?
Oh, it's a very good question. I mean, if you look at our work, I think you will see that it's very diverse, and this diversity comes out of context, you know, and context can be so many things. It's the region that you're building in, it's the culture, it's the specific site, it's the climate, it's the building technology, all these kind of things. And I think trying to explain to you that we follow concepts, not ideas or design, it makes it quite clear, at least to me, that we are context-specific conceptual architects. So I cannot tell you why really we are interested in spreading around the globe, but it gives us the possibility to test this context-specific approach in many different regions. And that's what I meant with when we came to Austria with a bunch of people. We were able to much better work in the German-speaking region, not only because of the language, but because we were able to understand the cultural context so much better. And I think that the projects that we have developed in the German-speaking languages are very much different than the projects that we have developed, for example, in Saudi Arabia or in Australia, but they follow the same set of values and ideas, but they don't follow the same architectural geometry or design strategy. So I actually don't think that our approach of having studios on different continents will lead to, rolling out a certain design. I think, but you have to judge for yourself, of course, if you agree that it will, I think our approach is very legitimate because it really respects local conditions. Yeah, and that's also what I ask students to do. You have to find your way of interpreting the task, and you have to. I think being context specific is the most important task for an architect, and that's what we try to do around the globe. Did I answer your question, Mr. Anonymous? It's a bit sad that it's anonymous. It's cool that there are a lot of questions here. You want to pick one out, one more? Or we can also do another chapter. I don't care, really.
Let's do another chapter. And maybe we haven't finalized the format completely. Maybe we do a few more chapters.
Absolutely,
up to you.
Absolutely.
And then we can have a little bit longer discussion if we can.
But maybe you want to choose one, huh?
Okay, let's go for two.
Yeah. I actually talked about it a bit, but this is a little bit of a look back because that's how Snohetta came to life. We won the library in Alexandria, and totally irrational. You know, there was almost 1,000 architects in 1989 when that competition was launched that applied for competing, and there was over 600 who actually submitted a design. So the statistic likeliness of winning that competition is close to zero, of course. But the founders found this competition so interesting that they really put their knowledge and their soul into this project, and it's of course it's a fantastic project. I also still have to say, but it's funny, you know, this picture from the award ceremony. They called it's these three young guys who traveled to Egypt to receive the award, and there are rumors saying that when the competition organizers saw these three young kids, almost they put their hands above their head and say, "Oh my God, what did we run into here?" But it worked out in the end. You know, for these young people, mostly from Norway, it was a big adventure. But we took the task very seriously, and we not only introduced a building that was very socially sustainable, we introduced processes where we tried to involve and care about, for example, construction workers in a way that was unknown in Northern Africa for the time. So, for example, we insisted in the contract on having Scandinavian safety standards on this construction site, which led to that they had to fly in a whole container with helmets and hard shoes and vests. But it resulted in not one fatal injury on this huge construction site, which was unheard of in Northern Africa at the time. What we also did is we, like in many projects, we worked with some artists for a key feature of the project, like the facade. Here was Jorunn Sandnes together with two other artists that developed this facade. And at the time, we thought it would not be a big problem to acquire this handcrafted granite in Egypt. You know, you'd think that finding stonesmiths in Egypt would be an easy task with their history. Well, it was not that easy. There was actually almost none left. So what we did is we flew in a whole group of people, stonesmiths and sculptors, who would train a whole group of young people, young Egyptians, in the craftsmanship and educate them to be stonesmiths. So these kind of ideas, and they realized this huge facade that hopefully will last for a very long time in this very massive quality here. So why I'm telling this is that these things, they lead to what I meant with social sustainability, with a certain identification of people. Oh, I'm missing one photograph. I forgot to put it in here. Doesn't matter. There is a photograph from 2011 where when there was this Islamic Spring and there was a lot of violence in Alexandria and Cairo, and in Cairo, a lot of buildings got severely damaged. But in Alexandria, there was a group of people, hundreds of people, who would form a chain of humans to protect the building because it was their building, because maybe their father was working on the construction site that did not get hurt, or their uncle was one of the stonesmiths that was educated by the people, or maybe her mother appreciated that she was allowed to enter this sort of open building, disregarding her sex and her religious background. Another project that probably most of you know and that I've already talked about is the Opera House in Oslo. I mean, again, this was an open international competition, over 250 entries. And at the time, the situation at Snohetta was pretty difficult because we had just completed the library in Alexandria. We had no jobs on the table, so the people invested really their personal time. They were not paid for working on this competition, but it was such an interesting task. And these are actually the renderings from the competition. you see how also visualization technology changes over the course of time. But we realized after the winning the competition, and after this was actually before the opening, you can see that it's still partially a construction site, but they had a sort of an open day at the opera, and over 20,000 people came to visit the building. And this is exactly for this reason that I mentioned before, is because we gave respect to the people and not only to the ones who are interested in the high culture in the opera itself. And this, I love this picture. You know what it is? It's a Justin Bieber concert on a pontoon. I'm sorry, I only have these very bad images here. But they tell the story, you know. This is a building for everybody, and if it's the kids that actually appreciate what this Canadian guy does, it's totally fine, you know. This is what public space is supposed to provide. And of course, you know, the chapter was do things that you're interested in. Disrespectful if you think you can win or not. We won the two big ones, but there's so many other big ones that we didn't win. Like here, this was our suggestion for the new museum in Berlin, where we had a similar idea between the Nationalgalerie and the Philharmonie in Berlin, where we wanted to introduce this public surface. We all know, I assume, you know which project won, and I don't think it has the same amount of public quality, the project that was selected finally. Yeah, so again, of course, I know this is an academic lecture, so I just want to give hope to the students, you know, first of all, by my story, starting as an intern, and now being a partner in this company, and also, you know, dare to participate in these things that are unrealistic, because if you think that it's relevant what you can participate with, it's going to be good for your own, for your self-confidence, and you can't expect to win. Yeah. When it comes,
there's still other votes. Actually, just one thing I would like to question a little bit. What I find really super interesting is you were talking about this cultural context as a big important issue, and that the first project of the Innsbruck office were mainly German-speaking.
Yes.
Places. How do you cope with that cultural context if you go to a new country for a project?
Well,
do you involve people, or how do you generate contacts, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there is something, I think both sides of the coin are relevant. You know, having the view from the outside sometimes is also important. But then when you get into the design, you need to understand where you're working. So in the Budapest project, I think it was important for us to be bold and to look at it without the detailed knowledge, because maybe otherwise we wouldn't have suggested this additional canal. We wouldn't have been so brave. But then when we start to work with it, then we look for partners. So we spend days and almost weeks in the city. That's also how we met. Then in the end, we try to find the people that have this local knowledge, and we try to have an open dialogue. And maybe I can attach that to a question that I read here in the Q&A. When it comes to crucial design decisions, how does the management include the less senior staff? I mean, this is a question that you could also put out to how do we include knowledge from people that are not on the team, but that we work together with. I will show you a picture in one of the chapters. I think I can find it here. We saw this one already, but because I like the picture for the reason that this is something we did 2 years ago. This is the Innsbruck office, and we did not, in this year, it was not this climb of the mountain in Norway, but we went for a canoe trip in Sweden. And everybody was allowed to come, everybody who was working at the office at the time, even the interns, so the part-time staff. And we, on one of the days, we had this circle, this seating circle, where I had given a challenge to the whole office to define, I mean, the reason was that it was the 30-year anniversary of the company, Snohetta, and I wanted everybody to write down what they think that the next 30 years are going to bring, both for us as a company, but for the profession in general. And here it's currently the youngest guy, David, who is holding this stone, and only the person holding the stone is allowed to talk. And he had exactly the same opinion about the future of our discipline than anybody else in the group. And I think this is indicative of how we also work in the design. I myself, as a managing director of this office here, I do not have a superior voice in the design process, but I have a voice, of course. I can have an opinion and I can have arguments, but we will try to consolidate the different opinions in these design processes. And that's where these concepts are really helpful, because we don't talk about I like or I think it should be filleted or I think it should be green. We go back to the concept and look, what is it that we defined as the main driver for our project together 3 weeks ago? And does this decision that we are currently taking lead us in this direction or not? So trying to take it away from subjectivism and really boiling it down to concepts. I think that's our strategy to get away from this master thinking, because it's very easy, to do a sketch on a serviette and then hand it on to somebody in the team, but it's much less. It's much less collaborative, and that's what we really appreciate a lot.
All right. So shall we maybe go on for one more?
Yeah. Okay. We can check the numbers a bit. Let's see. Is there something 10, 10, 9, 9, 10? What is 10? Consider other species. Yeah, that's a nice one. We can maybe do this one quickly. This is something that is is going to be very important. Climate change has a variety of consequences, but the reduction of species on our planet is a serious threat. And we all know it from the bees, and some of us know it from other big mammals, but this is really a serious threat. So this is also our responsibility as architects. So this is one project. It's actually the project that is housing the most individuals that we have ever designed, because they're bee houses, and there's over 120,000 bees in one of those bee houses. And they are on the top of the market hall in Oslo. And the honey that's produced in this bee house is sold 6 meters below. So these kind of things, they're very easy to do. They involve, being in dialogue with people who are experts. We, for example, developed this brick in the New York office that you were able to just purchase and then put in the facade of your house to allow for birds to inhabitate areas in the city that normally are very hostile to animals. Or, for example, we introduced on a commercial site, just on the back of this Kristallwelten project, that was our first project here in Innsbruck, a huge orchard, over 3 hectares of commercial site that the client was willing to convert from a very boring cornfield, monoculture without any biodiversity, into this apple orchard. Because for him or for them, the idea was the revenue of these 3 hectares of corn was next to zero, both economically, but especially also ecologically and socially. So to convert it into this publicly accessible orchard was an investment of, I think, 250,000 euros. But the return is that people now enjoy this place. They can pick apples. We introduced over 85 different apple trees on these areas, retrieving old species from Südtirol and from Upper Austria, bringing them back into the country. We have bee houses. We have special facilities for birds. So we increased the number of species by a multiple just on these 3 hectares. And this is something I really, and also this possibility to take your dog for a walk on something that was formerly, I would almost call it industrial agriculture, is of course a great possibility. And it yields happiness. You can go there and pick your raspberries and plums and take it home to your children or to your parents, and that gives a certain symbol. So this investment for this company is investing into biodiversity, but also a certain social connection, which I think is very important. So, starting to be a bit tired here, but this is really fun. I think this is cool because it could go on for a long time. So it's up to you, Arpad, to say, okay, now it's enough. Now we can cut it.
Actually, what I really find this format very exciting that you actually proposed, because it's really not linear. And it brings about a lot of new questions, lot of new issues, and we can also see that in the questions posed.
Yeah. Do we want to go through 1 or 2 of those questions to finish off?
Yeah, let's try that.
For example, here's a question.
Yes, please.
About the education. So what you think about the architectural education, for example, in Austria or in European context? So do you think curriculum will provide the necessary skills for students to battle climatic and cultural change? Or architecture often seems marginalized and being in its own context without actual effect. So what you think that how prepared the students arrive your studio? And it's also a question that how you can adapt students or young architects to the task or your design concepts. So is it easy to work together, young architects or students, or what is your emotions and experiences?
Well, I wouldn't have mentioned David if I wasn't impressed, but by what young people can contribute with. So I'm confident that including, and I can even say that at my age, the next generation is essential. So about the education, you can't say, I think it's very difficult to say in a European, is the European architecture education right or wrong? There's so many different tendencies and directions, but what I believe in is that we need to continue to teach the artistic aspects of our discipline, because machines are going to take over the boring tasks. And I'm sure you've seen things like SpaceMaker that could lead to the thought that artificial intelligence can do urban planning. I mean, it's quite scary if you check it out. But then if you think about it in more detail, it actually increases our value because only we as architects can have, you know, these aspects of concept and context. The machines, they can learn about building regulations, solar exposure. They can have, they can optimize GFA and net use areas, but they cannot think about spatial qualities and, for example, also irritations. And many times, especially in urbanism, there is something about the irritation of the rationale that will increase the quality of a space. So, so what I'm saying is that I think people need to learn some of the boring stuff also, you know, the computer sciences, and of course need to learn about the numbers in the sustainability equations like I told you about. But what really architects have to do also in their studies is being creative and finding themselves, and being a bit too crazy for the market is definitely a quality. You know, if somebody comes to me with a portfolio that shows me a housing project and there's nothing beyond that, that's not interesting for me, because I will not see a possibility to give a creative input to a design process. Of course, it's okay if somebody knows how a housing project works, but I'm more interested in like I said, these aspects of even subjectivity and creativity in a personal opinion. So I mean, what architecture education is really about is finding your opinion. That's, I'm very convinced about that. So maybe don't always do what the teacher tells you. Really find out. That's what actually a strategy I once had or wanted to do is every time somebody brings me what I asked him to do, he will get a negative number, because it's about forming your own opinion. It's not about doing what somebody tells you to do. It's just my opinion.
Actually, just to a little bit reflect on some of the things that you said previously on the workshop process.
Yes.
And this the values of physical collaboration. I think it's super interesting what you say, to put it together a little bit, because I think that's what all of us actually struggle with, especially in education, that we have all these fantastic computer tools that we can share through the screen, just like we are sharing the lecture now, but we do not really have the physical interaction, the physical collaboration. I really like that word, and the workshop process that generates emotions, ideas, misunderstandings, discussions, whatever.
There is an aspect also of the physical model which is more and more underestimated, because we're all so used to visualizations, and sometimes I hate this endscape. You know, I'm sure you know it also. You know, this real-time, semi-photorealistic, because it's so biased and it shows us one aspect, the visual impact, and it's controlled by the person steering the computer. And a physical model made out of cardboard or out of wood or whatever, out of gypsum, is much more neutral. It triggers imagination, and it gives everybody the possibility to form their own opinion. It's not biased by the person operating the computer. So I think these are aspects that we need to, and it takes a big effort in an office to make people go into the workshop, because it's much more easy to press the Enscape button in Rhino than it is to build a nice model in the workshop. But so it takes quite some discipline, actually. But we must not lose this, because what we're talking about in the end are sensual spatial experiences, you know, and you cannot simulate that with the computer only. Yeah.
Just a very simple question. Is Corona influencing your work methods now in the office?
Yes, it is. It is.
How do you cope with it? It's really personal, maybe not that interesting architecturally, but I would be curious.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it has a lot of positive aspects. I have to say, I'm not traveling so much. I get to go more skiing. No, it's really strange, you know. I would never have imagined that it's so pleasant to be more with my family, because I don't have to travel to Oslo. But of course, there is a big risk in this. Like we said, talking about physical, you know, the difference between a video meeting and a real meeting is the comments on the side. It's the body language. It's the, you know, the aura, if you want to believe in those sort of things, of the person you're sitting next to. So this terrible efficiency of the Teams meetings is really getting on my nerves, you know, because we are lacking the possibility for discussing something on the side. So I'm so surprised how well we are coping with the situation. I mean, it's given us all this digital boost that was overdue. And we have seen that we can win competitions in lockdown situations, but I think it's because we practiced the physical coexistence for a long time. I don't think you can form a team out of the cloud, put them together in a Zoom meeting or on a Miro board or whatever, and then do something substantial. I don't believe so. We will find out. I really cannot say. But it is interesting how it has increased the digital possibilities and abilities. Yeah.
And what kind of projects are you working on now?
All kinds of different projects, from small scale. I would say the smallest one is a sampling kit for an industrial company, where it's about samples of sheet material, and the biggest one I think right now is commercial development in Verona in northern Italy, where it's about retail, hotel, also student housing, so all kinds of scales. So this is the fun thing also in an office, where you're not locked down to a certain either geometry or typology, is that you can do different tasks, you know. And we often say it's not about the project, it's about the client. Do you get a client that is willing to take maybe this extra mile, maybe is interested in results that he or she didn't expect? And if people find us either through a competition or through a direct commission, and we can have this interesting dialogue, then we'll do anything, you know. So like I say, it's we of course we get a bit of we had a few touristic projects in our office, from hotels to installations in the mountains, which are now more on hold because the tourism industry, of course, is very hit by the virus, but not all the projects are stopped. So yeah, we will see.
Okay, we more or less discussed that we will finish the whole session around 7:45.
Yeah.
We still have a few minutes. Of course, we haven't asked all the questions that appeared in the chat. I myself also have a lot of questions, to be honest.
That's okay.
especially about the Budapest project. I would have a lot of questions, but I think this is not the correct time. Maybe I ask Domonkos if he has one final question, and then we will try to conclude somehow.
Final question. Yes, so it was really interesting to see that how this global office is working during this hard time, and maybe you can say some words about your research interests. So what kind of topics are in your mind, maybe different from the design task, general about the architecture or design? So have you some interest in other field of architecture or culture that are interesting for you?
I actually prepared one of the themes a little bit around this one. It goes into, I mean, we are investing a lot of energy into these more straightforward embodied energy topics, like I explained with the powerhouse projects, and how can we really do them outside of Scandinavia in different contexts and so on. But we also do other things. You know, for example, we're working on branding projects that are way beyond, you know, just designing a logo. For example, we're working with Wikipedia, creating their new visual identity, which is in itself not so much a design job, but it's really a collaboration job, because we had to talk to hundreds of people who have a voice at Wikipedia. We're in research, for example, on material sciences. Here we have developed a methodology to use special oils to make timber 100% resistant to the environment. I mean, to the natural environment, making it super, and this is a very sustainable oil. That's a natural oil where we have 100% infiltration of the timber in this oil that we can use, and we expect a lifespan of over 50 years for this product. We go into material research. For example, one of our colleagues here in Oslo is interested in clay. He's not the only one interested in clay, but we're also interested in clay. How can we use vernacular material in contemporary ways? What are the possibilities? We've developed this project with plastic where we use recycled plastics, all things that other people also do, but we try to find an edge. So we developed, for example, this chair that is made in the Norwegian furniture industry. There is actually quite a big furniture industry on the west coast of Norway, and it's at the same location where they have a lot of fishing industry. So we're using recycled fishing nets that come off the boats. They travel for 2 kilometers and go into this production facility for these chairs, and now those chairs are used in a wide range of functions in Norway, especially also in a lot of schools. It would not be meaningful to export these chairs to Hungary or to Austria, because then, of course, we would again increase the CO2 footprint of this chair. But in Norway, it absolutely makes sense to use the fishing nets for this chair production. And this one is a screenshot recording from an internal project, just to show you a little bit how do we work in these times of pandemic. This is, for example, a sequence where you can see the whole design process of a competition that we were working on in Leipzig in Germany for a music lab, where you see how people actually collaborate with digital tools and how well it works partially. So so this adaptation, constant reinvention, is of course very important. So we always say our biggest project is actually Snohetta itself, and then the research goes in different directions, like I say, materials, processes, and then technology concerning sustainability. Yep.
So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I think we have to conclude. Maybe it was a perfect last, so to say, sentence, that your biggest ongoing project is Snohetta itself.
Exactly.
That will go for another 30 years. So I think we will finish now.
Yes.
I would like to thank the audience. At one point we had more than 200 people.
Very good.
Of course, we could not answer all the questions and we could not go through all the topics, but I think the format was extremely interesting. So I'm very thankful for that. It made the lecture really dynamic. And I thank Domonkos, but of course I especially thank you, Patrick, for your really exciting lecture. Thank you for coming, for participating. I hope it was
so
also...
we will have a glass of Unicum next time I come to Budapest.
Yes, yes, we have to do that for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
So thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.